This is Tom Schreiber, and you're listening to Pro Lacrosse Talk.
On Schreiber.
Sidearm whip, scores!
Now it's one. Fidel scores! Hands off for Ravel, switches hands and scores!
Carly Omo showing off those shifty skills.
Right off the bat, there's Lyle Thompson.
Welcome to Season 2 of the Pro Lacrosse Talk podcast, the voice of Pro Lacrosse. I'm Hutton, he's Adam, and together we're bringing you interviews from all your favorite players and coaches, as well as news and analysis from all 4 professional lacrosse leagues. Welcome to another episode of Pro Lacrosse Talk. I'm here with co-host Adam and Pro Lacrosse Talk contributor David Wildman. David, welcome to the show. How's it going today?
Good. Thanks for having me on, guys. Excited to make my debut. Excited to be back in my room after a long 4 hours coaching in the hot sun, but ready to talk some pro lacrosse with you guys.
No, absolutely. And for people that don't know, David has written countless articles for us the past 3 months. He's currently heading up a lot of our fantasy content right now. Got a full fantasy ranking in the works for the PLL Fantasy Challenge that Flow Fantasy is doing. We're also going to talk about PLL betting a little bit today, as well as the biggest news from the week, that the MLL is returning for a 1-week season right before the PLL. So we're getting 3 straight weeks of pro lacrosse, 38 games in 23 days. So we're pretty excited about that. I guess let's start with that, guys. What are your guys' thoughts on the MLL announcing its return a week prior to the PLL's return?
Yeah, I'm ecstatic that we're going to have so much lacrosse in such a short span of time. You know, we weren't sure about the MLL for a little bit there, right? We had a number of big announcements from the league, from sponsorship deals to a variety of different things. So we thought with all of that coming down the road, a season would hopefully happen, and it certainly is. So I'm ecstatic that it's going to be happening in my backyard in Annapolis. So it's going to be fun. And then obviously everyone down in Utah with the PLL as well. So we're going to be all exhausted after watching all of this lacrosse, I think.
Yeah, we're going to get like at least a game a day, maybe, even 2 or 3. I know the MLL is kicking theirs off with three different games. All the teams are playing. They're each playing 5 games. Then they'll follow that up with a semifinal matchup between the top 4 teams. And then they'll finish with the championship, which actually overlaps with the PLL second day. So going to be a little bit of overlap there, which will also be interesting. What are your thoughts, David, though, on this announcement?
Yeah, for me, being a Midwest lacrosse fan, it's going to be one of the first opportunities I've had to really watch Major League Lacrosse on TV with the ESPN deal. So, from my perspective with, basically now we're looking at the better part of a month chock full of lacrosse games. It's like a glimpse into the future of what pro field lacrosse could be. Having games every day, you kind of think of it like an NHL schedule. There's always something to watch during the season. And so I think for me, it's exciting that we're going to have now, I think, 13, 14 teams.
13 teams, yeah, total.
13 teams playing jam-packed schedules. And so for me, I hope it's kind of the pacing that we can get used to eventually with pro lacrosse.
No, absolutely. And, we mentioned earlier a little bit too, the PLL betting, I think, is also going to add a whole nother layer, as well as, the fantasy lacrosse that Flow Fantasy is doing. So with that, let's discuss PLL betting. William Hill just announced the betting lines this past week for the futures bets for these 7 teams in the PLL. The odds right now are the Whips are 3-1 odds, Chaos are 4-1, Redwoods are 9-2 odds, Archers are 9-2, Atlas are 11-2, Chrome are 8-1, and Waterdogs are 9-1. So I actually live in New Jersey, so I actually placed a $50 bet on the Archers. I kind of went back and forth between the Redwoods and the Archers. I didn't want to hit the Whips because their odds, are obviously higher, but in terms of, more riskier and more reward bet, they just didn't make sense to me. Same for the Chaos, who I actually, really don't like in terms of them winning the championship anyway. So I decided to go Archers. I hedged my bet a little bit, though. I also put $50 down on the Waterdogs as well because they had 9-1 odds. So I know I'm going to guarantee a loss of $50 depending on who wins, but hopefully I can, get the Archers to either give me $250 or the Waterdogs to get me $450 added on to that if they end up winning this championship. So I placed my bet. I don't know if I'm the first one to do it or not, but I think the first one to publicly do it. So I have placed a bet on PLL and on Pro Lacrosse, and I couldn't be more excited for it. But what about you guys? What are you guys' thoughts on, if you are able to bet, I think, that's going to come to more states, who you're putting your money on?
Yeah, I think you mentioned the Waterdogs. I know they're an expansion franchise, but in this format, less days, I honestly think they're one of the most stacked rosters. So I'd love one of the arguably riskier bets, the 9-1 with the Waterdogs. And I'm on the other side of you. I think the Chaos would be a solid bet. They have the best 2 goalies in the world, in my opinion, in Dylan Ward and Blaze Reardon. And I can't see them letting in too many goals. So from a defensive standpoint, and I'm excited to see what their offense looks like with the infusion of all those box guys. So if I had to bet on 2 squads like you did, I'm going Waterdogs and Chaos.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of the Chaos. I just think, I don't know. They have solid attack, like you mentioned, arguably 2 of the best goaltenders. And again, you can't always just play the odds too. You got to bet on somebody that you think is going to actually win. And obviously, you could make a case for any of these 7 teams. But I don't know, just on paper, they're not a team that really jumps out to me. And then the 4-1 odds gives me hesitance too, because, you're really not getting that much of a return if they do win. But yeah, that's just my opinion. But yeah, I don't know. What do you think, David?
I think looking at it right now, I would almost flip the Chaos and the Redwoods. I'm sort of with you, Hutton, that I think the Chaos at 4-1 isn't real good money. I think I have some serious questions about some of the things that they did this offseason. And I'm just not sure they've got the horses. You saw them run out of energy a little bit last year. I'm not sure they added that second option to kind of take some of the pressure off Connor Fields, because once defenses really started zeroing in on Connor Fields, it was kind of like, all right, what now? And they really struggled in some 6-on-6 sets because of that. One I really like the Atlas at 11-2. I think that they're a squad that really, obviously with Pinnell coming in, they made some big upgrades. On the defensive side, still maybe a little sketchy. That's where they struggled last season. But I really like their midfield unit. I think there's some 2-way middies in there. I think they've got some depth in there that they're not getting credit for. I really like them at 11-2. And then, like I said, I think the Redwoods at 9-2 is a really safe bet. I think the Redwoods have one of the best rosters in the league. I think Coach Nat St. Laurent did a great job upgrading the roster this season. And I think at 9-2, that's good odds.
Yeah, I went
on Curtis Dixon on that attack line.
For the Chaos. I think we, with Austin Stotts and Curtis Dixon coming in the fold, but what gives me pause is actually the other side. I know we mentioned the 2 goalies, but with the Chaos, they're only taking 3 polls. I'm sorry, they're only taking 5. With the Chaos, they're only taking 5 polls, 3 defensemen and Jack Rowlett, Jared Newman and Johnny Surdick, and they're going to be missing, Brody Merrill, who's now in the Waterdogs, and Matt Reese and Troy Ray, both at LSM. I mean, those are all solid defenders, but they just don't have a lot of depth, whereas some other teams, I mean, like you look at the Chrome, who neither of us mentioned, I kind of thought about maybe going with them. They're taking 5 defensemen, long stick midi and Eli Salama, and then Donnie Moss can also run pole if they need to. So they kind of have, 6 or 7 options there at defense that I think, they are going to be a little bit better built, because to me, if you lose an offensive guy, there's going to be somebody that can kind of step up. You can run somebody, from out the box if you need to, or you can move a midi down to attack. You lose a defender, are you going to give a short stick defensive midi a pole if they need to? I mean, some people maybe it works, but to me, that's where I kind of looked at this is the teams that are kind of really took a lot of depth at pole are the ones I kind of like. I really like that the Archers they have 3 defenders in Matt McMahon, Eli Gobrecht, and Curtis Corley, but they also have LSMs at Mike Simon and Scott Ratliff as well. Their short stick defensive minis and Dominique Alexander and Mark McNeil are also huge assets. So I think they also have the depth. Christian Mazzone, too, has gone both ways. I know you mentioned the Atlas. You think there are some 2-way middies on there, and I think, Brian Costabile is certainly one of them. But to me, I still need to see a little bit more from a guy like Romar Dennis, who I think could be a 2-way guy, but we didn't see it last year. So that kind of gives me pause on the Atlas. But again, we mentioned the depth on all 7 of these teams. It kind of gives you there can be a case made for really any of these teams.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned Romar a little bit there about potentially being a great two-way option. When I interviewed Coach Rubior, he was emphasized that he was super excited about Romar's game on the defensive end too. So that's something I fully expect to see from that Atlas squad is Romar going both ways.
Yeah, no, certainly. And, you can't sleep on the Whip Snakes too. Even though they are 3-1 odds, you're not going to make the most return from your money. They are the defending champs. Look a lot different this year, but I think, Coach Stagnita did a good job reloading. You're going to see the debut of Brad Smith, Zed Williams in the PLL, and then TJ Camizio in the PLL as well. And then Max Tuttle also added to that midfield. So, they're going to be another interesting squad. And they're also taking 6 polls on their roster. Only going with one face-off guy, Joe Nardello, though. We know Jake Bernhardt could take some face-offs if needed, but I think they're going to rely heavily on Joe Nardello to stay healthy during this championship series. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Pro Lacrosse Talk podcast. Today I want to talk to you about our sponsor, Anchor. We've been using Anchor for the Pro Lacrosse Talk podcast since the very start. Anchor gives you everything you need in one place, and better yet, it's free. They allow you to easily record and edit your podcast, and once it's published, they send it out to all the major networks such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and many more. They also connect you with advertisers so you can start making money from your podcast right away. So if you're thinking about starting a podcast today, download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Today I also want to talk to you about Tomahawk Shades. Tomahawk Shades have an array of both quality sunglasses and blue light glasses at a fraction of the cost of popular sunglass brands. Their blue light glasses are perfect for guys like me who spend hours looking at a computer screen when editing. They also have a great collection of sunglasses with pro athletes like Kylie Ohlmiller, Kyle Harrison, Mike Chanichuk, and Chris Hogan repping the brand. So if you want a pair of the shades the pros wear, visit tomahawkshades.com and use the code PLT20 to save 20% on your order today. But that kind of, is our breakdown too for these rosters, as well as, how we kind of stand on betting. So far, that's the only betting news we have in terms of the future odds. We're hoping that we're going to get live betting come the championship series. We're hoping that, maybe we'll get some parlays, prop bets. And I know we're going to be doing our PLL parlays anyway, whether they have them or not. But I did want to kind of have a fun little segment where we talk about PLL prop bets a little bit. So I came up with 4. You guys are going to tell me if you're going to hit the over or the under on these.
All right.
And I made them, they're pretty tight lines. So you're going to have to make some decisions here. But the first one I have is, will Jared Newman have over or under 3.5 2-point goals this coming championship series?
I think I'll have to take the under on that. I love Jared Newman, but there's so many threats with the ball on that Chaos roster, especially in transition, and so few games that seems pretty high. I'm sure I'll have 1 or 2, but 3.5, I'll have to take the under there.
Yep, I'd have to agree. That's what I was thinking too. With the depleted number of games, I just don't think he's going to have enough opportunities. I think he will take more than 3.5 2-point opportunities, take 2-point shots, but I don't necessarily think that it'll hit over that.
Yeah, no, we got to remember there's only going to be 5 games, so it's going to be a very abbreviated season. It's tough too to kind of make these decisions based on we only have 1 season to work off, and that blueprint is completely different from what this blueprint's going to be. But I'd probably agree with you. I'd take the under on that. I think if I had to guess, I'd give him 3 goals, but I don't think he'll get 4 or more 2-point goals.
If he hears that, I think he's going to go for some Newman nukes and get a couple more than we think.
Yeah, his slogan was you should have slid again last year. Maybe it's like you should have hit the over. You think he'll say that in the game? Maybe. We'll see. And then the next one I have is Trevor Baptiste mic'd up goals. Over under 0.5 point.
I think that's an easy one. I'm going on the over with this. I think with how successful miking up players were last year, with how successful him specifically was, with that speed boy goal, he has to get at least 1. I think he scores on at least 1 face-off this year. So I'm going over.
I was going to say, I think if the PLL knows what's good for him, they'll just stick a mic on that guy and leave it on him all tournament.
Yep.
And like you said, I'm sure that he'll put one in the back of the net at some point, and I think the odds are pretty good that he'll have a mic on him when that happens. So I'll take the over on that.
All right, I'm going to take the over as well. When I was coming up with these odds, I was like, I don't think he would hit 2, but I think he'll hit 1. So I agree with you guys on that one. Now, this one's a little tougher because there are only 5 games, but Ryan Drenner game-winning goals, over under 2.5.
So let's is this a caveat in terms of OT game winner or scoring the final goal?
Just game winner, just game-winning goal. So I guess we could say this includes go-ahead goal as well.
Okay. I think that changes it up for me a little bit. That roster is so stacked with guys like Ben Reeves, Christian Cuccinello, and obviously Zach Currier. I'm going to go with the under just because of how balanced that offense is going to be, I think.
Yeah, I think I'll have to take the under on that as well. Just a really stacked offense. And, you know, Drenner's a late game guy. You can count on him, but with so many options and a new offense and only 5 potential games, I think we'll have to take the under on that, but I'm sure we'll have 1 or 2.
All right, I'm going to take the over. I think he'll get 2 in the maybe the regular season play, the pool play, and then I think he gets 1 in the playoffs. You know, maybe it's that first round. Maybe they have the bye. Maybe it's, you know, later rounds, but I'm going to take the over. I think he gets at least 3. You know, any more than 3 might be tough, but I'm going to take the over. I'm not going to bet against Ryan Drenner's game-winning potential.
He had ice water in his veins last year, so it only makes sense he's on the Waterdogs.
Absolutely. And then the final one I have for you guys, PLO overtime games, over or under 9.5. Now, there's only 20 games total, so you think there's going to be half the games are going to go to overtime, or you think less than half?
I'm going to hit the over on this one just because I hope that it's the over and we get at least 10 overtime games. That would be absolutely absurd. This is a wishful thinking one. I'm going to hit the over.
I was going to say, I think I'll take the over on that as well. In the championship format, with just how stacked all these rosters are. I mean, there's no easy matchups. Going to be a lot of 1-2 goal games. So I think saying that maybe half the games go to overtime, I'll take the over on that. Have a little fun.
All right, I'm going to go under. I think it will be around 8 or 9. You know, I can't get to half yet. You know, it's going to take a lot for them to be half. Maybe half will be 1-goal games. If we did that, I think, you know, I'd probably have to hit the over on that. But I'm going to take the under on that one. Yeah, those are our 4 prop bets that I came up with. We'll see how those turn out later in the season. Maybe winner will get everyone else dinner or something. We'll figure some prize out, some agreement. But those are the prop bets. We hope prop bets are introduced to the PLL. Well, again, it's kind of tough to tell what they're going to do. They only have 1 season under their belt to really go off, and a lot of times these books have to look at history to kind of make up these odds and come up with these different prop bets. So we'll see. But we're really excited again about PLL betting, and we're really excited to kind of see what this comes out of this PLL Championship Series. Another thing I mentioned, though, was the fantasy aspect of things. Now, the PLL is not officially doing a fantasy challenge, but Flow Fantasy is one of our content partners. And they've put together, a whole platform that you can draft from. If you guys haven't signed up yet, go to flowfantasy.com and sign up. Invite your friends. You can have up to 12 people in your league. But David right now has been working on his fantasy rankings. He's ranking all the players. We have actually their totals from last year. Had PLL fantasy been a thing last year, obviously we did our little small challenge, but the point system's a little bit different. So let's talk a little bit about this point system and see who you guys value most based off this point system. So Flow Fantasy's point system, it's a little nuanced because they put a lot of high totals, and it's very varied. It's not as simple, I guess, as you could say, as last year. And the reason they did that is they want it to be, create more parity among position groups. But a goal will give you 4 points. An assist will give you 5 points. 2-point goal will give you 7 points. Ground ball will give you 1 point. If you have a turnover, it'll be -2 points. And then if you cause a turnover, it'll be 7 points. So they're really, helping out the defense in that regard with this cause turnovers counting as 7 points. And then going off of that, Fogos and goalies will begin the game with 6 points. And then there's broken down into percentages. So based on their face-off or save percentage, they will get a certain amount of points. So that is also on their Instagram and their website. So going off of that, though, guys, who are you valuing? What position group are you valuing? Again, they created this point system because they wanted to parity among positions, but we know that's not always perfect, and there's always going to be somebody that kind of stands above the crowd. So, David, you're working on the rankings right now. Who would you kind of take as your number one pick? What position would you kind of target first?
It's tough, and without playing, it's really hard to say. But looking based on the point totals, I think the guys over at Flow Fantasy did a really nice job balancing. I think most would agree that attack and midfield should probably be a bit more valuable than your defense. That's just sort of the way lacrosse goes. But that being said, I think if you can get a defender who really puts up numbers, whether it be goals or cause turnovers, that's going to be really valuable, and those are going to be really rare. I think that you're going to be able to fill out your attack and your midfield in the later rounds of the draft. But if you're sitting there with a high pick and you got a guy sitting there that really, picks the ball off, can get the ball out of guys' sticks, can pick it up off the turf, I think that's going to be the rarest thing. But there are a few really high-producing polls in the league, and I think if you've got an opportunity to take one, you want to strike on that. That being said, there are a few guys that I feel like unfortunately get kind of left out in this equation. Jared Newman comes to mind. He's a guy that is a really solid on-ball defender. You love his tape. But as far as numbers go, he'll have the occasional two-pointer. But, he's usually marked up on the number one attackman on the other team and just doesn't cause a ton of turnovers. So, a really good defender like him who just kind of goes out and does his job, unfortunately not going to be worth a ton of points. But like I said, if you can get a guy that puts up numbers on defense, I would strike on that first. And then I think you're going to want to start filling out your attack because you get a lot of high-scoring guys on that attack line.
Yeah, no, and I agree. And it's interesting, too. I know we weren't super crazy about the point system when it was first announced just because there is some nuance to it. With goals being worth less than a cause turnover or even an assist, you're going to weigh it a little bit differently. Whereas, Grant Ament could get just as many points as, say, Will Manny. But if Will Manny's scoring the goals, Grant Ament's scoring the assist, Grant Ament's going to get you more points. So that's something to note, again, not completely agree with it all together, but that's what it is. And I think it's important to kind of make sure that you're drafting accordingly to that. Because I know we talked to, one of our contributors, Dan Aresti, brought up a good point. If Matt Rambo gets you 4 goals, that's 16 points there. Scott Ratliff could get that in one play. If he causes a turnover, scoops up the ground ball, and then hits a 2-pointer, that's 15 points right there. So it's almost the exact same. So your offensive players are going to have to, work a little bit harder to get those point totals. But, everyone also they'll have 3 attackmen, 3 midfielders, and 3 defenders plus a goalie and a face-off guy. So it's not totally out of the realm of the possibility that, you're going to still see pretty even if offensive players tend to do worse than defensive players based on this point system. Everyone else is still going to have a level playing field because you can only start so many players. So even though I was a little worried about that to begin with, it's not really that much of a concern to me now because even if, I have Scott Ratliff on my team, I still have to start 3 offensive guys as well. But that also goes into your draft strategy a little bit. And that's why I know you're developing the rankings a little bit based on that. Like you said, you'd probably take a defender that is going to score some 2-point goals first. What about you, Adam? What do you like? What position would you eye in this draft with the drafts coming up, in a week?
Yeah, I think one, maybe not a specific player or that might go high in terms of where he's drafted, but a position I know I'm biased that I'm going to really stringently look at is the goalie position, predominantly because I think you can throw out a lot of last year based off of how condensed this season is. Goalies get banged up really easily, and they're not going to have too much time to get healthy again potentially if something does happen. So looking at last year, we were nervous when picking goalies because say the Archers have 2 phenomenal goalies on their roster and we're splitting halves. That could be something that happens this year, or they could go every other game. You have a team, like I mentioned already, the Chaos who have 2 of the most elite goalies in the league. Are they going to both play? Obviously, Coach Tower said Blaze is the guy going into this, but I think coaches may have a quicker trigger to switch up goalies potentially. So goalie is going to be one of those interesting positions, I think, when it comes to the waiver wire. We'll talk about that once things get started, but goalie may be a position where a lot of players get added and cut from rosters potentially pretty quickly.
Yeah, no, and the save percentage is going to be interesting because, it can really shift either way.
Yep.
If a goalie has a good game, if he's above 50%, in save percentage, he's going to get you a handful of points on top of that 6 points he starts out with.
Yep.
If he has a bad day, and lets in more than he saves, which, is rare but can happen, and then he gets pulled and he's your starter, he can't make any of that back up and you're going to be in the negative, unfortunately. So it is going to be a very important position. And it's tough too because, we talked about how the Chaos arguably have two of the best goaltenders in the league, but you can only start one goalie. Are you going to take a chance on Dylan Ward or Blaze Reardon if you don't know who's going to be the starter? We've been told that Blaze will start the beginning of the championship series, but again, I think you mentioned you hit the nail on the head with the waiver wire being important to pick up. But this is only a 2-week season too, so it's not like you can pick up guys daily. It's going to be weekly, so you only have one chance really to pick somebody up either at the beginning of the season or the middle before that second week. So yeah, it's going to be interesting for sure. And I know we're in a fantasy league together, so I'm going to ask you guys a sleeper pick, and feel free to maybe hold one in your back pocket if you don't want to give away, because we do have our fantasy draft coming up. But who is a guy that you think would be a sleeper pick to look at going into the championship series that, maybe people are, not riding too high on and that you want to kind of grab in the later rounds?
I think there's two here. I do really like Dylan Ward. I have a hard time believing that Andy Towers, who has Blaze Reardon, isn't going to use him in an offense that's going to be so predicated on box concepts. And I know I've asked him personally, and he shot it down, and he's been asked, and he shot it down. But I have a very hard time believing that we're not going to see Blaze Reardon step onto that attack line a couple times in this tournament. And then I think you're going to see a ton of value in Dylan Ward. So, that's not me sourcing anything. That's just me speculating. But I have a really hard time believing that Dylan Ward's not going to see a really good amount of action. I also really like Jake Withers. I think that face-off guys are valued really highly in the scoring system, as they should be, a very important position. And I think Jake Withers is going to step in and make a name for himself as one of the top 2 or 3 face-off guys in the league. So I think that you might be able to catch some people in your league sleeping a little bit who maybe don't know who Jake Withers is because he hasn't made a big name for himself on the field level. But I think if you're looking for a value face-off pick, Jake Withers could be your guy.
Yeah, I like the Jake Withers a lot. He's dominated in the box game, and he had a pretty good field career as well at Ohio State, making them going all the way to that championship. I don't know though. I don't really agree with the Blaze thing. I just don't know where you fit him in. You got Austin Stotts, you got Connor Fields, Curtis Dixon, Josh Byrne, Miles Thompson. I think your point's still taken with the fact that you got Dylan Ward, sitting on the bench. You're going to get him in at some point. I'd be shocked if he doesn't get in about the same amount of games or about the same amount of time as Blaze does. But I don't think we see him at attack. That's just me. I think you got a loaded attack right now, and I think people are sleeping on Austin Stotts a little bit because he hasn't really played in the field game.
Yep.
He might have high school, went to the box game, got drafted in the MLL. But he's been, lighting up for the Seals. Hopefully he's healthy. He looked good when he came back for the San Diego Seals this year. I think it took him a little bit of a while to get going, but you got Curtis Dixon we mentioned. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, and for mine, I'm going to go with an offensive player that I know is definitely going to play offense. This for at least 5 games, right, is Ryan Ambler. I've been Team Ryan Ambler since day one. You don't hear his name too much, but he was second on the Archers last year in assists during the regular season, second in the postseason as well. So when you're talking about sleepers, I think about guys who you don't hear their name very much, and he's a guy that has produced last year, and I fully expect him to do so for this championship series as well. And then another guy on the other side of the ball, Rylan Reese. He was a stud last year in the MLL, making the transition over another name maybe some fans don't necessarily recognize since he wasn't in the league last year. I think those two guys are big money players that maybe you get a little bit later.
Yeah, Rylan Reese is a good one because, last year I think he led – I want to say he led the MLL in ground balls. Now, don't quote me on that, at least for defenders. You look at him, he's a guy that, like you talked about, David, is somebody that you want to look at in your defenders, maybe not right away because, again, you don't want to jump the shark if you think you can get him in later rounds. But he's going to get you cause turnovers. He's going to get you ground balls. And you can bet that with this shorter field, he's going to rip some 2-point goals as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think especially he's a guy, we're not talking ADP average drafts position just yet with Flow Fantasy. But Reese is a guy that if you draft him day one of drafting, he may go a little bit lower. But when people catch on, I think he's going to shoot up draft boards.
Absolutely. And another thing I want to kind of talk about is, so we kind of have the points breakdown that Flow Fantasy simulated last year. Some people, though, we don't have. We mentioned Rylan Reese, Jake Withers. We don't really have anything to go off for them. Even though we do have stats from the MLL last year, it's still a very different game based on these rules. So which new PLL player do you like the most, whether it be an entry guy or a college draft guy that you think is going to put up big numbers in fantasy?
I'm a big fan of Grant Ament, I think. Obviously a tremendous talent, and I was actually writing about the Archers last night. And, I mean, you really couldn't have picked a better attack line to just put Grant Ament in there.
Mm-hmm.
I said if Marcus Holman and Will Manny are the PLL version of the Splash Brothers, Grant Ament could fit in there like they're Kevin Durant. I mean, you can't draw up a better player to slide in there, I think. Especially as it pertains to the fantasy game with how assists are valued over goals. I mean, I think that dude's just going to stand behind the net and just feed goals to Holman and Manny all tournament. And I think that he's going to be a really, really, really high-producing rookie.
No, I like that pick a lot. Like you mentioned, assists are worth 5 points. And if you have Holman and Manny, getting the same point totals as him, he's still going to score more fantasy-wise. So, I like that pick a lot. What about you, Adam?
Yeah, the Zach Couriers of the world are obviously going to be up there, but a guy, another potential sleeper maybe, but a guy that I think is going to have a much larger role than some expect is going to be a guy like Zed Williams with the Whip Snakes. I think he's going to be an awesome candidate for to get those assists when he passes to Matt Rambo or he has a wicked shot, so he's going to score. I think he's going to load up on points, so I'm going with Zed.
No, I like Zed a lot, and they are going to use him in so many different ways. I mean, that offense for the Whips is so fluid anyway. They can plug him in and attack. They can run him through the box. I like that pick a lot. For me, you mentioned Zach Kerr. I think it's hard to pick anybody else for me personally. He's going to get you cause turnovers. He's going to get you goals. He's going to get you tons of ground balls. He may even face off a little bit. You won't get any points for him facing off just because you have to start a face-off guy in that slot. And you'll probably want to start him on your mini slot. But, he's another guy that, you just can't – I think he's built for this PLL rule set as well as built for fantasy based on these point systems. And then, I do like Rob Pennell as well. He's gonna get goals. He's going to get assists. He was the MLL MVP 2 years ago for a reason. I think he's a guy that's going to really thrive in the PLL. And he's got Ryan Brown to feed to. And Eric Law too. You got Eric Law and him are going to have that 2-man game going. So I think he's going to be up there as well for me. But he's a guy too that, everyone, when you're drafting, you'll always have a few guys that'll take Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady in the first round. If Rob Pennell is there in the first round, I think I might pass on him a little bit. It's, again, I value him as a player, but I don't know if I want to, sell the farm to get him in the first or second round of a fantasy draft. I'd wait a little bit in the later rounds. I think that's what's going to be interesting about this fantasy draft. It's new to everybody, but you really got to be strategic with it. It's almost like in football, you kind of want to take those running backs that are going to be, few and far between compared to, quarterbacks that you could maybe get in later rounds for the same value. So it's going to be interesting. We're going to help a little bit, hopefully, with David's rankings. But with that, I appreciate you guys coming on for another episode of Pro Lacrosse Talk. We're excited about PLL betting. We're excited about fantasy lacrosse, and we're certainly excited about the MLL and PLL returning this July. So we appreciate you guys listening and hope you tune in next time to Pro Lacrosse Talk. Today, I also want to talk to you about Design Tree. On our Design Tree store, we have several t-shirt designs like the Pro Lacrosse Talk tee I'm wearing today, our Blast Lacrosse shirt, Crosses Medicine shirt, and many more designs on the way. Design Tree is also home to hundreds of other t-shirt designs in the realm of sports and pop culture. To help support the podcast, please consider checking out our Design Tree store at dsgntree.com/pro-lacrosse-talk and grab a shirt today.